So let's just get right into it. I've got the basic layout, or not the layout, sorry, just the app itself created. Just the first setup. So it comes with my main activity, an activity main for my layout. I've already added just a blank now playing activity because that's part of the rubric. Is we want to take the data from the main activity, from the list view recycler that we're going to create, and pass that off to the now playing so that it displays on that screen. So that's what I'm going to walk through on this video. Is loading the recycler and then passing that data. Best way to do that is through an intent, and then have it read it on the other activity and display it on the screen. So let's go ahead and we're just going to get started. So one of the big concepts that we went through in the videos for this is just the concept of having a custom object that essentially we can store all of our data in that object and have an array list of those objects. So the difference between like a list where you have a singular item, singular file type, that sort of a thing, and an array list is an array list can be composed of the first item can be a string, the second item can be an integer, the third item can be a string again. So you can have different variables in there, and that's where the custom object comes into play. So let's go ahead and create that custom object. So since we're doing music, we might as well call it a song. So I have my public class. Now this is the point where we decide what sort of items we want to be able to store. So the things that you're going to want to store will most likely be strings, but we want to store string of the artist name. We want to store a string of the artist song. I can't remember off my top of my head if it's required or not to have images. I thought it was optional, but if you want to store an artist image, you want to store that as an integer, and we'll call it the artist image. And then once you get into playing with the media player and actually having song files play, you can add another integer here and call it artist song, and you would pass that value through. So ultimately, these are the three things that you need to have in your song class. I'm going to add one more string value artist featured. So sometimes with songs you have a primary singer and the song is featuring someone else. So the images that the demo pieces that I have, they have a featured artist. So these are sort of things that when you're thinking big picture, how can I make a music app, these would be the things that you want to kind of consider as you're developing these things. Is what on the big picture would I want to see when I'm looking at these details, and that would be one that you would probably care to see. So I have my initial values. So now I need to build the constructor, and it's going to have the same name as the class because that's how we're going to instantiate it. And then you decide what you're passing through. So I'm going to pass through a string, and I'm going to call it artist name. I'm going to pass through a string. I'm going to call it artist song. So you're starting to get the idea of what is happening here. So I'm passing through because this is a constructor, this is how we're going to create the object with the data that we want. So to do that, you have to pass in variables. Artist feature. Okay. So now within the constructor, I have to essentially, because you're taking things, you're giving in the constructor the input of these strings here and the integer, you have to then pass it back out as something for your array list, for the recycler view, the list view to use on the other side. So to do that, you pass this, and we'll start with artist name because that's what I'm doing first, and it's equal to my input. And you'll notice once I do that, it goes from kind of a grayed out saying it's never used to, oh hey look, it's finally used. You also notice that my red has disappeared as well from my string artist name because I've now called for both of those variables. So we'll do artist song equals artist song, and your IDE is smart enough to know that when you do artist image, when you start to type in artist, it knows that, oh, you're probably looking for this integer value. So it's smart enough to autofill some of those things as you go through. So tab and enter will become your best friends. So we have the constructor, we're passing the variables, and we're outputting those variables as something that the constructor can use. But we still need to be able to get this data on the other side. So to do that, we want to call getter methods. And as you can see, once you start typing in public, your IDE is smart enough to know that these are probably some of the things that you're caring to do. So I want to get my artist name. And hey look, it already fills in everything that I need to make this class. So I'm creating a method, get artist name. It's going to return a string, and that's it, because that's all I need. I only need to know what this artist name was. So we just continue doing that. So I have the name, I need the song, I need the image, and I need the featured artist. And I like to just close these down just because it cleans things up a little bit for when you're looking at it. So that right there is the building of the custom object. Now, the other thing that you can do, which most people do, is then you create the array list in your activity. The other thing that you can do is you can put it in a custom class and kind of do a get artist, or get song details class. I'm not going to go through that in this walkthrough, but if that's something that you're interested in, you can find, I've got a couple repositories on my GitHub that you're welcome to look through. They're demos kind of like this, but there's one specifically that goes into that concept of building an array list outside of your main class so that you can use that same data in multiple places. If you have multiple activities, multiple recyclers, list views, however you want to look at that, I'll make sure to post the repo link at the end of this. But so I have my song built, and now I want to kind of walk through the setup of the main activity. So if I go to my main activity, it's really just gonna kind of start with just the main layout. There shouldn't be anything here, and actually I'm gonna backstep a little bit, and I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go to my XML for this. So as you can see, I start with a constraint layout, one of the more useful and efficient layouts that you can have, but it does take a little bit of getting used to, just getting to that point of being comfortable with it. So what I want to do is create the recycler, and I'm going to walk you through a RecyclerView because that's what most people are asking about, because that's what a lot of the reviewers are suggesting is, hey, instead of a list view, you should use a RecyclerView. The RecyclerView is more powerful, it has more flexibility, there's a lot more that it can do that a list view doesn't do. So learning it now will help you out on the future apps. So to create a RecyclerView, there are a couple implementations that you need to have in your Gradle. So in your Gradle, you need, ultimately you need just this RecyclerView support library. If you want to also include the card view, you can. That's one of the elements that I use in here, but it's not necessary. The RecyclerView is the one that allows you to use the RecyclerView itself. I would recommend staying on 727, not going up to 28, just because they're still working out some odd little things with it, and the reviewers may or may not send it back to you saying, please put this on a functional library, because not everyone has updated everything to allow for API 28, so stay on 27. So I've loaded it into my Gradle, and then I want to create the RecyclerView object. And I'm going to set the width to match parent. I'm going to set the height to match parent because I might as well just fill in the whole screen. And since it's a widget, it's an object, there should be no views within it. So I can just close the recycler there. I want to give it an ID. Be real creative, call it RecyclerView. And ultimately, that's all you need to do to set up the XML side. So our main activity itself is done. But we need to actually do the initialization and all of that stuff, all that fun stuff. So we want to create a RecyclerView, call it RecyclerView, and set it to find by ID, r.id.RecyclerView. So there we go. So we're most of the way there. So RecyclerView, just like a list view, has an adapter of some kind. It's what takes the input data and formats it in a way that you can send it back to the recycler, and then the recycler will kind of just repeat those items. So we're going to create the adapter now. So that's a new Java class, and it's always better to call things what they are, and I mean, because it's going to link all the pieces together and whatnot. So as we go through this, because this is a RecyclerView, you're going to want you're not going to want to automatically alt enter and import, do the import statements, because we're doing this with custom objects. We're also building a custom view holder. So the view holder is basically the object itself that will be repeated on your screen. So that's the list item that you would see in a list view. We do the same thing with the recycler, it's just called a view holder. So that view holder is what gets repeated. So because we're doing custom objects, you're not going to automatically want to just straight up just import these, do these import statements as they come up. You're going to be much better off to just create it and move on. So you see how it looks red, and we don't like seeing red, but it will clear itself out as we move forward. So we want to work with an array list, and we want the array list to be built with our song object. So we're going to call it song items. We want to pass through a layout inflator, call it inflator, and ultimately that's all you need here. I'm going to add one more fun piece that most people haven't gotten to yet, but I'll explain it in a second. So I'm going to add a private custom ClickListener. Now bear with me here, because that's red. It doesn't recognize what it is. I'll call it my ClickListener. So my custom ClickListener is going to be a custom class. So it's going to go in all the same places. So you right click, create the class. It's asking, where do you want this? So which package in your Java do you want this? I want it right in my normal my default Java class. So there's my custom ClickListener. So you've created it. We're just going to tweak it a little bit. We're going to make it public, and we're going to call it an interface. An interface file is different from a class in the fact that it's just saying, okay, what do you want this to do? What do you want to allow for on either side of this where you're creating it? So it kind of bypasses context in a little bit and allows you to use this interface across multiple activities. So I want to create a void, so no return, but I'm using my onItemClick, and you'll understand why I'm doing this in a minute. So I want to pass in to this onClick a view and an integer of position. And that's all I have to do with this, and then I can walk away. So once you do that, then your custom class here, because it recognizes, oh hey, there's a class there, I can use that class. So then we can move forward. So those are the things that we would need right here as private variables. So we want to create our constructor again. So we're creating a public song adapter, and we want to pass in some data. So we want to pass in the context, because that matters in this, because it needs to know where this adapter should be applied to, and that context is usually in your main activity. You reference that with this, or your activity name dot this tends to be what your context is. I also want to pass in an array list of my song object, and we'll call it song items, because I like calling things what they are. And then I'm also going to pass in this custom ClickListener. And again, you'll start to see what this means and what it does on the other side. So I'm going to say song items is equal to song items, because that's what it is. I'm going to say this dot ClickListener is equal to ClickListener, and then my inflator, because you notice I didn't pass in an inflator, I passed in context, we're going to create a new layout inflator from the context. This is how it inflates the layout that we're going to create with this view holder, is it has to do that from context. Okay, so I have my constructor built, and now I need to do some overrides. So I'm going to do my first override, and it's going to be a public song holder. You'll notice that's what we're trying to pass through up here. And I'm going to do this as an on create view holder. So this is creating the view holder itself, and that's why I have my song holder class as the return, or song holder object as the return, because that's what this needs to return to me so that it can inflate correctly. We're going to pass through the view group, call it parent, and we're going to pass through int view type. So we're going to set the view, or we're going to create a new view and set it equal to our inflator that we created just earlier, and we're going to inflate r.layout. Now when you go here, because we haven't actually created the layout itself, it doesn't show up, so give it a name. So this is my recycler item. We're going to give it a view group of parent, and we don't need to attach it to the root view. Now again, like I said, you're going to see red as we're going through this. It's okay. It's what we want it to look like, because as we build this out, those red things will go away. So now I want to create a final song holder, and we're going to call it song holder. We're going to set it equal to a new song holder, and its input will be the view itself. Now I want to take my view and I want to set an on-ClickListener, because that's one of the things that we care about, is we need to be able to pass, or we need to be able to click on the item and tell it to do something. This is one of the easier ways to do it, because you're setting the ClickListener in the view holder itself, rather than setting the on-ClickListener and having to get the adapter layout position and kind of futz with some things in your main Java class. You can set it in your list, in your adapter here, and it's going to be a new on-ClickListener. It creates your on-click interface, or your on-click override, and then this is where your custom ClickListener comes in. So we want to take my ClickListener, and I want the on item click, and it's going to be our view is what goes in first. So the view is what object was actually clicked on within the recycler itself. And then I care about the position, and the position is based off of the song holder, which we just created here. So I'm going to do my song holder dot get layout position. And again, until it knows what a song holder is, this is going to be red for a moment. And then I need to return my song holder, and I'm done. Now we move forward, and we want to actually create the item view. So we're going to create a new layout, and since I called it recycler item, I should probably call it the same thing here. recycler item and create it. Okay. So now, like I said, what I'm going to use, actually, no, I won't use that. I'm going to go with the constraint layout, but I'm going to change my height to wrap content. And I think you'll see why. So this is where we're going to kind of define the item that gets repeated. So probably want to start with the text view. I'll set the width to match parent, height to match content, and a fun little tip here is if you do tools.txt instead of android.txt, what you type in will only be visible in the editor, and if you were to inflate this on its own, it wouldn't show any of the text on your actual app. So I'm going to pass in the artist name here. It's basically just seen as a placeholder. So we're going to make that text size bigger because that's kind of an important one to have. And I'm going to add an overall padding of ATP. That just gets it off the edge. Actually, let's make it 12. Get it in a little bit more. So, since I'm using constraint layout, we need to add some constraints. So we want top to the top of parent, and that's all we should need, but it's always nice to just make sure you have all your bases covered, left to left and right to right. That just assigns where does the left start, where does the right start, those sorts of things. So I've got my artist name in there, and then probably want to do another text view, set it to match parent, height to wrap, almost forgot, give this an ID because that's going to matter in a minute. Call it artist name. Call this one artist feature. And now you notice in your preview it's floating over because the constraint layout is very similar to relative, where it needs to be assigned what it should appear next to. So I might as well do that now. So I want to constrain the top of this text view to the bottom of my artist name, and that will put it down below it. See? Now, again, you don't need this every time, especially if you have layout width set to match, but I like doing it just for conformity. And we're going to give this a text size of 18, and we're going to give it a text style of italic, and we're going to give it tools text, and we'll do that. And just to make it a little clearer, let's add a layout margin left of 6. Just indents it just enough. Now to think about it, let's add a style bold. So I have artist name, featured artist, and the only other thing that I should need to pass in is another text view, width, match parent, height, wrap, and I'm just going to copy this just for I'm saving, pass it, but I don't want it to be top to bottom of the artist name. I want it to be bottom of feature. That will place it below the featured artist. And actually, now that I think about this, I want to change that. So I want this to be below song name. And just because I can, move it up here. And we're going to give this tools text equals song name here. And we're going to give this a text size of 20 yeah, I think we'll call that good. So it's going to show artist name, song name, and then the featured artist. So that is my recycler item, and you notice the rest of that fills out right there. So now, excuse me, I continue on building my recycler adapter. We're going to do another override. We're going to pass in, we're going to create a public void on bind view holder. We pass in the song holder and a position. Now this is where I think a lot of people get confused. So I want to create a song object. So remember, our song is our custom object that we created, and I want to call that song current item, or current song, be better. And I'm going to set that equal to the ArrayList dot get the position within the ArrayList that this view holder is associated. Okay? So I want to take my holder, and I want to get the artist name. And again, this is going to be red. It'll fill in a little bit. I'm going to set text to current song dot, and there you see I have my getter methods. So this is the artist name. I want to get artist name. I want to take my holder, and I want to get my artist song dot set text current song dot get artist song, and then one more, because those are the only 3 text views that I have in there. Artist featured dot set text current song dot get artist featured. Okay. And that is my onbind view holder. Now an override. Because this is RecyclerView, we just have this one thing that needs to be created, and that's my item count, and it's going to return the song items dot size and be done. Oops, wrong side. Now I create my class song holder, and you'll notice, hey look, most of that just disappeared. It's going to extend RecyclerView dot view holder, and I'm going to have a private text view. We're going to call that artist name. I'm going to have a private text view. I'm going to call it artist song. I'm going to have a private text view, and we're going to call it artist featured. We're going to move down, and we're going to create the constructor. We're going to do song holder. We're going to pass in view, song view. And it's going to be a super method with my song view. Then I want to set my artist name equal to my view dot find view by ID, artist name, artist song is equal to my view dot find by ID, dot artist song. And then the same thing, featured is equal to song view dot find view by ID, r dot ID dot featured. Okay, now that is my adapter, and as you notice, everything that was red has now gone away. So now we can move on to the next steps of actually building the interface in the main activity. Okay, so we're going to do that next. Okay, so thinking about this a little bit more, I'm remembering that we're adding the image view as well. Or the image resource as well, but because I'm not planning to put it in my recycler, I do actually want to show you the walkthrough on building a custom ArrayList adapter, essentially. So we're going to call this my song list, and we're going to extend the ArrayList object itself. Okay. Give yourself a couple spaces, and we're going to create a private ArrayList based off of my song object. And we're going to call it, because I like keeping things the same, song items, and it's going to be a new ArrayList. Okay. And then I'm going to create a public method that returns an ArrayList, and we're going to call it getSongList. Okay, so now I want to take my ArrayList that I created, so my song items, and I'm going to add a new song. And then this is where, as you can see, it's asking me to input string or artist name for a string, artist song, and artist image, and then the featured. So let's go ahead and we're going to start building that. So the first one is going to be the Chainsmokers. So we want artist name first, then we want artist song, and then the next thing we want is the artist image. So we need to get that file. So I've already preloaded a few in here. So there's my image, and then it's going to ask for the final, which is the featured, and we know that Coldplay was in there. Okay, so we have our first new song object added to our ArrayList, And we just continue on, do that for all the new songs. And I'm just gonna do, I think I have 5. So we'll do Marshmallow, and it's the song Wolves. Marshmallow. Oopsies. Too many there. And artist featured is Selena Gomez. Now I know this is kind of cheating, but I'm just going to add this here now that I'm thinking about it, just to do a quick build for that, so I don't have to add more views to my layout. So I'm going to add a new song. This one's going to be by Zed. It's going to be the middle. Through our drawable, grab my Z image, and then this one features Aaron Morris. Song items, add new song. Oh, this one's by Vici. Song and it's going to feature blank, because this one doesn't actually have a featured singer. There's no, it's just him. So last song, add new song, one more by the Chainsmokers, and down, get rid of that. Trouble dot Chainsmokers. There we go. So I built my song items array list. So I need to return song items, and then we can take this data and pass it back through to our activities. Okay, so now we can close our adapter, we can close our list, we can close our custom object class, and now we can set up the recycler itself. So I have the recycler object created. Now I need to create my song adapter. I'm going to call it adapter, and it's going to be equal to a new song adapter, and it's going to ask for context. So I want to pass through this for my context, which references the activity itself, and then I want to pass through my array list, which I need to come back and I need to set up first. So I need to create an array list. Now this is where it comes in handy creating the custom kind of getter list piece. New song array list. Okay, so I created my array list, and now I want to take my song list, call them songs, and set it to So I've made my song list, which holds all of the list of that will fill the array list. So I want to take my song items array list that I created, and we're going to set it to songs.getSongList. This will get the data from the song list class and pass it back through, because that's what we returned. We're returning an array list into there, and that passes that array list into your adapter and allows you to work with it on the other side, if that makes sense. I'm hoping that makes sense. So now once we've done that, and then we get into setting the that custom click listener that we had done, because we still need to pass that in. So we want to do that as a new custom click listener, and now you see that it passes in my view and a position. So this kind of overrides the standard on ClickListener, because we want to pass in both view and position. Right? Right. And then so this is where we will kind of define the data that we're going to pass along to for our intent to go to the next screen. So we'll create a string, we'll call it artist name, and we're going to set that equal to what do I want to do? Actually, I'll do song wrong place. Oh, hush. Just put that there. There. That's better. Name, and we'll do song is equal to song.get artist song, and we just continue on down the road. Current song.get artist featured. And then we're going to get the int, the resource equals current song dot get artist image, because that's what we stored the value as. That's going to return the drawable reference, basically. And then we want to create an intent. Intent equals new intent from main activity.this, and it's going to go to our now PutExtra. So we need to give it a name. So we're going to call it artist. And then we're passing in the value. So we're doing artist name. And we basically just do this a couple times. Song, and then we can start our activity. Now playing intent. Okay, so now we need to, so we've defined that we get the details of the song here in the onClick based off of what we grabbed, and then we're putting those as extra data to pass along with this new intent. So we need to create the now playing class and the now playing activity. Since I'm running short on time, I'm not going to build out the now playing layout, but I am going to create the now playing activity. So just like a regular activity, we want to do it just like you would imagine. So we're going to take now playing and I got extra stuff in there that I don't need. So I want to create some new string values. So my string artist name is equal to get intent dot get string extra, and we're going to call that artist. Okay, so I am getting the intent that's sitting there. I'm getting the string extra that I stored, and I'm calling it by that key reference name of artist. Same thing, you do the same concept for all your other pieces as well. So song, featured, and image. Now artist image, we need that to be an integer. And this is going to be get int extra, and that's called artist image. Oh yeah, get int extra, artist image, default 0 if it doesn't pass anything. Should be what I passed through. Artist song, artist featured, artist image. Yep. So then, because I've gotten those extra fields, I can then assign these to the appropriate layouts and all those sorts of things, because I've taken that data and now you can assign it. So all in all, minus my colon there, or my semicolon, I've just about set it up. There's just a couple more lines that we need to add. So because we're using a recycler, we need a layout manager, and you can do this one just super basic. New linear layout manager, this. It just defines that your recycler will be a linear style rather than a grid style, or there are a few custom ones that you can do there. So then we want to take our recycler view, set our layout manager to our linear layout, and set our recycler view adapter to our adapter. And that right there is your full music structure class. So before I wrap this up, I did mention I would post this out there. So if you are looking for some extra help, just extra ideas, anything, go ahead and find me on GitHub at the Bailey Brew. If you're on the US side and going through the nano degree, you can find me on Slack using the same at the Bailey Brew. Otherwise, find me on GitHub. I think I have my email there. You can leave me messages. You can ask any questions that you have. I go by the Bailey Brew on pretty much every social platform, so you can probably find me if you're really looking for me. But I mean, with that, you've got your music app. You take a list view, you fill it with data, and then we pass that data to a now playing activity, which at this point I don't really see a need to walk through that, because it's just at that point you're just creating a single screen layout. It's just adding the image, adding the text strings, and arranging them in a way that's visually appealing. Hopefully this helps you guys out. Again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to find me, okay? Thanks. Bye.